Welcome back to Dragon Dreams. Have you ever had the problem when you're GMing that your players seem bored, they seem distracted, they seem uninvolved? Well, here is a GMing tip that will bring up your GMing game 1,000% and make your players so much more engaged than they are now. Stay tuned. So, what is that tip? Gamification. So, what is gamification? Well, the normal definition of it is taking something that's not normally considered a game and making a game out of it. But that's not what I mean, because of course, what you're probably asking is, but Ivan, a tabletop role playing game is already a game. So how could it be gamified? So let me unpack what I mean. See, Wizards of the Coast keep saying that they consider Dungeons and Dragons to be a storytelling game. Now, I think that that is really misleading and creates a lot of problems at game tables, because what a lot of DMs do when they hear that is they create a story ahead of time, and then the entire adventure is just kind of a railroad in which the players are just kind of along for the ride, and the only thing that they get to do is roleplay their guys and roll dice and hopefully kill the monsters. But it's kind of like you're a director of this movie you want to make, and your players are just improving the main characters. That's not what a TTRPG is or how it works. So the way a tabletop role-playing game actually works is that there's a bunch of situations and there's problems to be solved in dealing with those situations. Some evil monster or bad guy is trying to sack your village, and you stop them, and it involves going into their lair or something. And there's a series of problems that the PCs have to overcome in order to do that. Now, after that is done, you can look back and say that was a story, but it's not a story in the sense of somebody telling a story. It's a heroic simulation in which the players are portraying heroes and interacting with a made-up world and overcoming the problems of that world that they want to overcome. And it's only kind of like a story after the fact, if you see what I mean. So what I mean by gamification is that for each problem that your PCs encounter on the adventure, you're going to kind of like make a game out of that. So what is a game? A game is a series of moves. It can lead toward either a success, a win, or a failure, a lose. If players make good moves, they're more likely to win, and if they make poor moves, they're more likely to fail. So with each problem that the PCs face, what you can do is you can think through what's the end goal, that's the win, what happens if they fail to receive that goal or succeed in that goal, that's a lose. And then you can think through what moves they may make and think through what moves would succeed and what moves would tend to fail, what moves would be good and what moves would be poor, and reward them for making good moves and, make it harder for them to succeed if they make bad moves. The key here is that a tabletop role-playing game has a concept that players can try anything. In fact, Ben Milton has said that that concept is a critical part of the definition of a TTRPG for him. So, yes, think through the moves that you think they may make, good and bad, but also let them try cool stuff out. And if they come up with something that you never thought of, which they're very likely to do, my players do it all the time because they're really smart, let them succeed or have a high chance of succeeding. So let me give you an example. Let's suppose that the party is going down a river to get to the dungeon. Now, you want something to happen along their travels. What you might do is you might have a waterfall. I love waterfalls because they're so much fun. All right, so you could, if they're on a boat or a raft, you could give them clues the waterfall is coming up. You hear roaring ahead, you see a lot of mist ahead of you. You get to a point where it looks like the river just stops and there's no land beyond it, and below is there's just this valley that's just way farther below than the level of the water that the river is at, and they go, oh my gosh, it's a waterfall, right? Let them figure out how to not go down the waterfall and give them a reasonable chance of success, but don't just roll a die and say, okay, if they roll 11 or higher, they succeed, and if it's 10 or less, they fail. That's really boring. That doesn't actually give them agency. Listen to the plan that they have. Let them come up with a plan and make it, reasonably accessible to get to their end goal if they have a good plan. And if they have a great plan, I would just let them do it. Like, you don't have to make people roll all the time. If they have just sort of a average plan, you might go, okay, cool, roll a die and you get pluses to it. But if it's a really awesome plan and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, don't be like, okay, you have to roll a 6 or higher, and then because they're gonna roll a 4, right, and then they're gonna fail. They're like, that sucks, we made this great plan. Just go that's awesome, you guys totally don't go down the waterfall. All right. Next thing is they have to get down the cliff. And this is true even if they were hiking along the river, which they might have done. Be like, okay, there's a cliff that the waterfall is going over. How do you get down? And they might be like, well, we have a 50-foot rope. And so here's where you start kind of giving this pushback. And so there's this give and take. They're kind of coming up with an idea, and you're coming up with an idea of something that make it a little more challenging. Now, don't cheese them out with this by doing this too much, but kind of have some give and take. So you might think ahead of time, they're probably going to have a 50-foot rope. So make it 75 feet. Or you might think ahead of time that they're going to take 2 ropes and tie them together. So make it 120 feet. Don't make it insane. Don't make it 300 feet, which is requires 6 50-foot ropes. But just make it something to where, okay, you can rappel down it, but you need just 1 50-foot rope, or even just 2 in the party is not quite enough. All right. And then, start coming up with other little wrinkles to it. Maybe the nearest tree, might tie it around a tree, right? So then you might say, look, well, the nearest tree is 10 feet away from the edge of the waterfall. And kind of well, we're going to tie it around a rock. Well, the rocks are really slick. They have water on them. They might come up with some way to deal with that, all right? And just listen to what they have to say. And it shouldn't be a difficult thing to figure out where to tie it. Don't make this insane sadistic thing. Just like, it's just a little wrinkle to them to deal with. All right. Ask them how they're tying it, and if they come up with something like we double, triple knot it with a special sailor knot that my character knows because he has a sailing background. And we put a spike in it and, bend the spike over or something. Like, great, all right, that's awesome. Like, that's not going to come undone. And then they start rappelling down it, and then you might have something like, okay, maybe there's griffins that live in a cave behind the waterfall midway down, and maybe the griffins fly out, and now they don't get their dex bonuses for armor class. They probably won't get a shield if they also want to have a weapon out. If you say you're holding on to your rope with your weapon hand, okay, you can have a shield, but now you can't attack the griffins. They can't use two-handed weapons, including bows and crossbows. So they could throw daggers. They could pull out their swords and try to swing around and, get the griffins as they're coming in, right? But you should make this like this really interesting tactical fight. And I think your players are probably going to love it. So I think you get the idea by now. You might also include things like what's in the cave, make it a little more interesting than just a flat cave. Maybe there's like 15 feet down to stalagmites where you see some glittering jewels that the griffins collected because they're like shiny things, something like that. You might also give them some outs in this situation, like the griffins are just hungry, they're just predators. So they might not like to eat you, or they might throw some meat at them or something to make things a little bit easier. Let them get away, like, okay, we're just going to slide right down the rope and get away from them, whatever, right? And then once they're down to the bottom, then zing them with this. How do you get your rope back? Okay, and if they say, oh, we're just going to pull on it, you're like, I don't know, you guys said you did like a triple square knot and you took a spike and you bent it over. I don't think you're going to get that. Like, you made sure you couldn't, have it come undone, right? You couldn't undo it when you pull on it, when there's like 6 party members all rappelling down this at the same time. I don't think just a little shake is going to bring it back. What are you going to do? And if they didn't think of that ahead of time, well, maybe they lose their rope, and that's part of the gamification. It's a resource management thing. They used a resource up in order to solve the problem. If they had thought of a really cool way that they could get the rope back, then great, they didn't use a resource. That's good on them, right? So that kind of thing. So there are several caveats to this, all right? So number one, don't gamify absolutely everything, or you're going to annoy the hell out of your players. Like, don't gamify finding the inn at the town. Like, they can ask somebody and they'll tell them, or the inn's probably positioned well so that customers will go there. Just say there's an inn, right? So that's caveat number one. Caveat number two is don't be a sadistic GM. All right, don't make this so unbelievably difficult that they feel like every time they do anything, there's a gazillion little nickel and dimey sort of things that they have to kind of suffer through. All right, and number three, don't be that GM who comes up with like some weird like mini game that doesn't make sense. Make it something that fits in with the world that feels organic and natural. Don't call it out as a mini game. Like, don't make them feel like they're in this weird video game where they have to like go into a little mini game and do something. Make it just feel like part of the adventure. They might not even realize you've gamified things. They're just like, oh wow, this guy's such a good GM. This is so fun. So I think if you follow these tips and avoid the caveats, you're going to have really engaged players. So tell me what you think about that. Tell me if this has worked for you. Have you tried things like this in the past? How did it work? As always, please keep your comments polite. I'm happy to hear what you have to say, and I won't judge your opinion, but there's no need for people to be hostile and whatnot with each other. And as always, happy dreaming, everybody.